Everything has its season, a time to be born and a time to die. For some, it's a grandmother or grandfather. For others, a mother or father. For some, siblings, friends, or lovers. Whoever it is, whenever it is, one thing is certain: at some point, we all experience the sting of death. We often talk about the beginning of life. We throw parties to celebrate the gender of an unborn baby, then another to shower gifts, and then another in the first 12 months of their arrival, and every 12 months thereafter. We share stories about the day we were born, even though we can't remember them ourselves, piecing them together from various sources. We talk a lot about birth, but rarely about death. Most of the time, we are forced to talk about death for the first time when it has already taken someone we love. But it doesn't have to be this way. We will all die one day, so we can at least talk about it while we still can. Here's what death is about. It's well known that death means the end of everything, the permanent cessation of all vital signs, heart stopping, breath ceasing, loss of all brain activity. Their heart is failing, the body is undergoing circulatory changes, the heartbeat becomes faint, the skin no longer shines like summer sunlight, a grayish-blue winter hue starts to dominate, most notably in the knees, hands, and legs. Their breathing becomes irregular, sometimes slow, sometimes rapid, sometimes shallow, sometimes loud. Now there's a series of respiratory changes happening. They'll breathe a few times in succession, then pause for a long time, no breath. Just when we think they've gone, they suddenly gasp again, breathe again. They haven't fully left yet, but they're close. Hours later, they'll pause for a long time again, but this time there won't be gasps to break the silence. As most people are about to leave us, heading towards the other side of life, they claim to feel a sense of readiness, like being embraced by nature, akin to how a baby feels in its mother's womb. It's a comforting feeling, a sense of completion, a feeling of peace. People often know what's coming next, even holding on until some significant event happens, and then letting go. You might be waiting for your mother to arrive, to thank her for everything she's done for you, or maybe calling a friend, telling them you forgive them for all their wrongs against you, or perhaps waiting to hug your child again, or to kiss your partner's cheek one last time. When death knocks on the door, we usually know who's at the door. We prepare ourselves, tidy up the house, then step out, lock the door, and throw away the key. As we step out, we gradually become confused, entering unconsciousness one last time, drawing the curtains on our lives. We die. Everything that happened up to that moment, we know and understand, but what happens afterward remains a complete mystery to us. The craziest thing about death is that we often say it's irreversible, that which dies will remain dead forever. Yet there are thousands upon thousands of people medically described as dead who come back to life, carrying with them countless incredible stories. We call them near-death experiences because we believe if it were truly death, they wouldn't come back to tell the tale. But is that true? We may never know. The information about near-death experiences is rich, those described as dead for hours or even days, who then return with extraordinary details of their experiences on the other side. Many who have had near-death experiences agree that the phrase "your life flashes before your eyes" holds true. Before the heart stops beating, we often see our entire lives. Yet, it's not as we imagine it to be. It's not the significant moments of life that flash before us, not the weddings, graduations, or the first cry of a child. Instead, it's random things like riding a bike, sitting at a desk casually checking emails, or staring at a white cat while climbing stairs. These are moments we wouldn't normally remember, but they're presented to us when facing death. If you think staring at the white cat while climbing stairs is a particularly specific example, it's because it is. a young man, during a near-death experience, saw this moment as part of his life flashing before him, yet he couldn't recall ever being on those stairs or seeing that white cat. Upon his revival, he drew the layout of the stairs and the apartment they led to, describing the cat to his mother, who told him they had indeed lived in that exact building, with the same layout of stairs and apartment, and they had lived with someone who owned a white cat. This isn't a crazy story until you realize he and his mother moved out of that apartment when he was only 14 months old. This raises a question: do all our memories still exist? Even the ones we've forgotten? When we die, do we see everything we thought we'd forgotten? Many fear death because it seems incredibly lonely. You come into this world alone, but do you leave alone too? Many who have had near-death experiences explain seeing deceased loved ones there, either guiding them to the afterlife or telling them it's not their time yet. Whichever it is, death is not as lonely as we imagine it to be. Whether it's their imagination comforting them in their final moments, making them feel at ease, or it's indeed the souls or spirits of deceased loved ones, we can never be sure. But what we know is, for most people, death isn't lonely, or at least it doesn't feel lonely. When it comes to the soul, it's a concept that science has yet to fully grasp, at least not in a way that can be scientifically explained. But considering many near-death experiences involve out-of-body experiences, perhaps it's time to reconsider whether it can be explained scientifically. I once heard a story about a freshman in college who had just died from an overdose of sleeping pills. His heart stopped for 3 minutes in the ambulance, yet he experienced everything on the ambulance, not through his own eyes, but from a third-person perspective, an out-of-body experience. What was shocking is that he saw the paramedics trying to save him on the ambulance, one of whom had striking peppermint green hair, a very distinctive feature that couldn't be missed. 3 days later, after he recovered in the hospital, he asked about the paramedic, the one he had seen during his death, and indeed, the paramedic existed. His out-of-body experience on the ambulance was filled with vivid memories. They lay on the ambulance, machines were running, and the paramedics were striving to save him. Upon hearing such stories, one has to pause and think, do we really not have souls? Regardless of what the soul is, are we really just composed of random atoms and molecules, reacting to stimuli thrown at us by nature? Or are we some kind of higher existence? These are the stories and experiences of those who have narrowly escaped death, marked by the scars of their battles. Yet, for most people, death signifies permanent departure. 1 to 2 weeks later, it's time for the final farewell. Much of our understanding of human history is attributed to how we bury our dead, from tombs to mummification. The deceased provide us with more information than the living. One of the oldest known international burial sites dates back approximately 10,000 years to Kafsa, Israel. The remains of the dead were carefully placed in coffins along with clothing, ornaments, food, and then these coffins were delicately positioned in a cave. Evidence from this cave suggests that the living adorned the dead with paint, held parties and feasts to commemorate their departure, and individuals were buried together as families. This indicates that as early as 10,000 years ago, humans understood the significance of death and the importance of celebrating life. Today, different cultures have varied ways of handling funerals. Most involve sitting together, reminiscing about the life lived, and discussing the deceased's accomplishments. Many religious organizations offer prayers for the deceased, seeking a good afterlife, or conduct funerary rites according to religious customs. Then, after the funeral, we bury the departed in the earth, scatter their ashes in the sea or on meadows, or preserve them in urns placed on mantelpieces. We shape them into any form we wish to keep them with us. Then, we start accepting the fact that they are no longer here, and we go through the 5 stages of grief: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. Denial is the first stage of grief. We can't accept that our loved ones are no longer here. We believe it's just a nightmare, but soon we wake up, expecting them to be back with us as before. When we realize it's not a nightmare, we begin to get angry. We question why fate is so cruel, why our loved ones have been taken from us. After anger comes bargaining, where we hope to trade some action for their return, promising to do anything if they could come back. Eventually, after bargaining fails, we fall into depression. We experience a grief so profound that we can't comprehend how to go on living. But with time, we gradually come to accept the reality. We realize they're gone, they won't return, and we must continue living. Although the 5 stages of grief may not always occur in sequence, sometimes we oscillate between different stages. However, ultimately, we reach the stage of acceptance. In this stage, we learn to coexist with our loss. We begin to cherish the memories, recalling the beautiful moments we shared. We learn how to move forward. As the saying goes, time heals all wounds. Though the wounds may never fully heal, with the passage of time, the pain lessens, and we find ways to carry on. In the end, death is not terrifying, it's merely a part of life. Everyone will experience death, and we shouldn't be afraid to talk about it. Instead, we should learn how to accept it. Because only when we come to terms with death can we truly begin to live. Death isn't the end, but rather another beginning. Just as dawn always disperses the darkness, we will eventually learn to confront loss and cherish every memory. Each moment of life becomes more precious due to its brevity. Let us feel love and hope as we bid farewell to those who have passed, understanding the healing power of time, and bravely continue onwards. For only by facing death head-on can we truly learn to appreciate each today and live a life without regrets. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.